The glass walls of the Sterling Aerospace boardroom reflected the city's skyline like shattered dreams. Nathan Carter stood at the edge of the mahogany table, his weathered hands clutching blueprints that trembled slightly. His faded blue shirt, a stark contrast to the sea of Armani suits, bore the honest marks of a working man. Damian Cross leaned back in his chair, diamond watch catching the light as he gestured dismissively. "Don't touch that, single dad." His voice dripped with venom. "You don't belong here." The executives erupted in laughter. At the head of the table, Olivia Sterling sat motionless, her cold emerald eyes offering no defense, her red dress like blood against white leather. Nathan's knuckles whitened. Then, with quiet fire that silenced the room, he spoke. "Belonging isn't determined by suits or circumstances, it's earned by what you create. What happens next will transform humiliation into awe as a single dad reveals the strength no one expected, and a CEO discovers what truly matters." The morning sun struggled through the grimy windows of Nathan's one-bedroom apartment, casting long shadows across engineering textbooks stacked like monuments to a buried life. 6 years ago, Nathan Carter had been aerospace's golden boy MIT graduate, youngest lead engineer at Nexus Dynamics, designer of revolutionary propulsion systems that promised to reshape space travel. His colleagues spoke his name with reverence. His wife, Sarah, glowed with pride at company galas, her hand always finding his amid the champagne toasts and congratulations. Then came the Aurora project failure. The experimental engine Nathan had warned needed more testing exploded during a critical demonstration, taking $3 million and his reputation with it. Damian Cross, then senior project coordinator, had masterfully shifted blame through falsified reports and strategic whispers. Within weeks, Nathan found himself blacklisted, his security badge deactivated, his parking spot given to someone else. The stress triggered Sarah's hidden heart condition. She collapsed at their daughter's second birthday party, red velvet cake still uncut, paper crown sliding from her head as paramedics worked frantically. She died before reaching the hospital. Grace grew up knowing her father through his sacrifices. At 8, she possessed her mother's honey blonde hair and her father's analytical mind, often catching him staring at old blueprints while stirring mac and cheese on their temperamental stove. "Daddy," she'd say, climbing onto his lap, her small fingers tracing the technical drawings, "these look like star maps." Nathan would kiss her forehead, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo, and whisper, "They were supposed to take us to the stars, sweetheart." She'd respond with the faith only children possess. "They still can." Olivia Sterling commanded boardrooms the way conductors led symphonies with precision, power, and an almost supernatural ability to bend others to her vision. Her platinum blonde waves framed features that belonged on magazine covers. But it was her mind that built Sterling Aerospace from her father's failing company into a $10 billion empire. She favored red, always red, the color of confidence and warning combined. Her presence made grown executives stammer. Her disappointment could end careers. Her approval launched fortunes. Yet at 3 a.m., when the city slept and her penthouse felt like a beautiful prison, Olivia stared at her reflection in floor-to-ceiling windows and saw hollowness. Success had cost her everything: soft friends who weren't afraid of her, lovers who saw beyond her bank account, the ability to trust without checking motives. She'd built walls so high that even she couldn't climb down. Damian Cross viewed the world as a chessboard where conscience was weakness and empathy was leverage. His aristocratic features, sharp cheekbones that could cut glass, gray eyes that never quite warmed, made him look like he'd stepped from a fashion advertisement for predators. His silver-gray suits cost more than most people's cars, each tie clip worth a month of Nathan's rent. He collected people's failures like trophies, displaying them in conversations with surgical precision. Olivia Sterling was his white whale, the one prize that would complete his collection. He'd already begun planting seeds of doubt among board members, questioning her recent decisions, her emotional stability, her ability to lead through crisis. Nathan's unexpected appearance in the boardroom presented an opportunity too delicious to waste. Nathan's current job at Sterling Aerospace involved sanitizing the dreams he once designed. Each night, he pushed his janitor's cart through hallways where he'd once strode with purpose, mopping floors where he'd presented breakthroughs, emptying trash cans that sometimes contained his old business cards found in desk drawers and discarded like expired coupons. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the necessity. Grace needed stability, health insurance, a chance at college someday. Pride was a luxury single fathers couldn't afford. The blueprints hidden in Nathan's apartment told a different story, one of brilliance undimmed by circumstance. During the long nights after Grace slept, he'd refined his original designs, solved the problems that caused Aurora's failure, created something revolutionary. But who would listen to a janitor? Who would believe the man who supposedly destroyed millions had actually held the key to the stars? The world had already written his story, they just didn't know the ending yet. The truth lived in encrypted files and hidden folders, in documents Damien believed destroyed but Nathan had secretly preserved. The Aurora project hadn't failed because of Nathan's design, it failed because Damien had altered specifications to cut costs, pocketing the difference while creating a paper trail that painted Nathan as the reckless engineer who'd rushed testing. The original design, Nathan's true vision, would have worked flawlessly. More than that, it would have revolutionized space travel, making Sterling Aerospace the undisputed leader in the field. Nathan had discovered the full extent of Damien's deception months after his dismissal. Hacking into archived servers from a library computer, while Grace colored beside him. The falsified test results, the redirected funds, the elaborate frame, it was all there, digital breadcrumbs leading to Damien's oak door. But Nathan had been a pariah by then, his accusations dismissed as desperate attempts to salvage reputation. The review board hadn't even allowed him to present evidence. "Mr. Carter," they'd said, not making eye contact, "the matter is closed." Sarah's death had nearly broken him completely. The investigation, the humiliation, the endless job rejections, he could have endured all of it with her beside him. But standing at her grave while Grace asked when Mommy was coming home, Nathan had contemplated darkness. Only his daughter's hand in his, small and trusting, had pulled him back. He'd made a choice that day: survive quietly, raise Grace safely, let the world forget Nathan Carter the engineer, become invisible, become nobody. It was safer that way. What Nathan didn't know was that his buried work had been Olivia's foundation. The fragments of his research that survived Damien's purge had been repackaged, renamed, and integrated into Sterling's next generation of engines. The innovation that made her company's stock soar, that earned her magazine covers and presidential handshakes, had originated in Nathan's late-night calculations. She'd built an empire on the bones of his dreams, never knowing the architect still walked her halls at midnight, pushing a mop bucket like Sisyphus with his stone, eternal and unseen. The aerospace industry was bleeding. 3 consecutive launch failures had shaken investor confidence, and Sterling Aerospace stood at the epicenter of the crisis. The latest satellite deployment had ended in a $50 million fireball. The footage replayed endlessly on financial networks beneath plummeting stock tickers. Olivia hadn't slept in 72 hours, her usually immaculate appearance showing cracks, a coffee stain on her designer dress, concealer unable to hide the purple beneath her eyes. Board meetings had become inquisitions. Damien, ever the opportunist, led the charge with subtle brilliance. "I'm not suggesting Olivia isn't capable," he'd say, voice dripping concern like poisoned honey, "but perhaps the pressure has become overwhelming. We must consider the company's future." Other board members nodded, sharks scenting blood in corporate waters. They spoke in euphemisms about fresh perspectives and strategic transitions, polite language for coups. Nathan faced his own countdown. The eviction notice taped to his door gave him 30 days past due rent finally catching up. Grace needed new school supplies, winter clothes, the inhaler that cost more than groceries. He'd already sold everything valuable except Sarah's wedding ring, which sat in his drawer like a promise he couldn't quite break. The janitor's salary barely covered survival. Saving was a fantasy for people with choices. The convergence was inevitable. Olivia needed a miracle to save her company. Nathan needed a miracle to save his daughter's future. Neither believed in miracles anymore, but the universe has a peculiar sense of humor about bringing together those who've stopped believing. Sometimes salvation comes dressed as disaster, wearing a janitor's uniform or a red designer dress, carrying mop buckets or corporate secrets, pushing people toward collisions that remake worlds. Nathan's reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a man wrestling with ghosts. Grace slept in the next room, her math homework completed with his help, her faith in him absolute and terrifying. The blueprints lay spread across the kitchen table, years of refinement, solutions that could save Sterling Aerospace, vindication in technical drawings and calculus. But approaching them meant risking humiliation again, meant stepping from shadows into firing lines. "You're still the same man who designed rockets," he told his reflection, but the words felt foreign. That man had worn ties, had spoken at conferences, had believed merit mattered more than politics. This man wore a name tag, cleaned toilets, had learned that the world respected bank accounts more than brilliance. Yet Grace needed him to be both the father who protected her and the engineer who could change their lives. The contradiction was tearing him apart. Olivia stood in her office as dawn painted the city gold, studying failure reports that read like autopsy results. Every analysis pointed to the same conclusion: the propulsion system needed complete reimagining. Her engineers offered band-aids for severed arteries. The board wanted her resignation letter. Damien wanted her throne. She pressed her forehead against cool glass, wondering when ambition had become a prison, when success had started feeling like drowning in champagne. She'd built walls so expertly that even facing catastrophe, she couldn't ask for help. Vulnerability was weakness. Weakness was death lessons learned from a father who'd loved companies more than daughters, from lovers who'd seen her as transactions. The idea of trusting someone, of admitting she didn't have answers, felt like stepping off a skyscraper expecting wings to sprout. But companies, like people, couldn't survive in isolation forever. Even queens needed knights, even if they came in unexpected armor. Grace found the newspaper article while researching a school project about space. Her father's younger face stared back, standing beside a rocket engine, the headline reading "Young Engineer Promises to Revolutionize Space Travel." She recognized the hope in his eyes, the same look he got when explaining constellations, before remembering they couldn't afford telescopes. "Dad," she asked that evening, "why did you stop building rockets?" Nathan's hands stilled over dinner plates. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the world tells you to stop." Grace considered this with 8-year-old wisdom. Maybe the world was wrong. The presentation had been Damien's trap, perfectly orchestrated. He'd heard whispers of Nathan's late-night calculations, seen him studying technical manuals during breaks. Through strategic manipulation, he'd arranged for Nathan to be in the boardroom during a critical meeting, knowing Olivia would be present, knowing Nathan couldn't resist trying to help, knowing exactly how to destroy him when he did. Nathan entered carrying more than blueprints. He carried 6 years of silence, of accepting blame for crimes he didn't commit, of watching his daughter count pennies for school lunch. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady as he began explaining the solution, his vision for fixing the propulsion crisis. For 15 minutes, the room listened. Board members leaned forward, studying his diagrams. Even Olivia's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Then Damien struck with practiced cruelty. "Excuse me," his voice cut through Nathan's explanation like a scalpel, "but aren't you the janitor? The same Nathan Carter who destroyed the Aurora project?" The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Interest became suspicion. Respect became ridicule. Damien stood, his designer suit making Nathan's faded clothes look even shabbier. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man cost Nexus Dynamics millions. He killed 3 test pilots with his recklessness. And now he dares stand here, pretending expertise?" The laughter started, small nervous chuckles from junior executives, then spread like wildfire. Someone mentioned Nathan's name tag. Another joked about mops solving rocket science. The blueprints in Nathan's hands suddenly felt like children's drawings. He looked to Olivia, hoping for something: recognition, fairness, basic human decency. Her green eyes remained arctic. When she spoke, her words were dismissive, each syllable a nail in dignity's coffin. "Mr. Carter, while we appreciate enthusiasm from all employees, perhaps you should focus on your actual responsibilities." Damien delivered the killing blow with theatrical flair, reaching for Nathan's blueprints. "Don't touch that. Single dad, you don't belong here. This is a boardroom, not a charity. We discuss millions, not minimum wage. Leave your fantasies with the cleaning supplies." The room erupted. Nathan saw their faces: tired executives finding entertainment in his humiliation, young associates learning how the powerful treat the powerless. He gathered his papers with practiced dignity, the kind learned from 1,000 small deaths. As he reached the door, he turned back once. "The Aurora project didn't fail because of my design. It failed because someone cared more about money than lives. That someone is in this room. When your satellites keep failing, remember you had the solution in your hands and threw it away because it came from a janitor." The silence lasted 3 seconds before Damien's laugh shattered it. But Olivia noticed something in Nathan's eyes: not defeat, but determination. The kind that moved mountains or destroyed them. The Prometheus testing facility exploded at 9:47 p.m. Nathan was 3 floors below, finishing his shift, when the building shuddered like a dying giant. Emergency lights painted everything hellish red. Automated systems announced evacuation protocols while fire spread through ventilation shafts, fed by leaked rocket fuel. Nathan knew this building's bones. He'd cleaned every corridor, studied every blueprint taped to walls. He knew the executive observation tower, where late meetings happened. He knew Olivia was there. The evacuation routes were compromised. The main stairwell had become a chimney of smoke. The elevators were death traps. But Nathan remembered the maintenance shafts, the service corridors no executive knew existed. He grabbed an emergency respirator and ran toward danger while others fled, his janitor's knowledge becoming unexpected salvation. The heat grew oppressive, metal groaned and twisted. Somewhere above, people were dying. He found Olivia in the observation tower, trapped behind security doors that had locked during the power failure. Smoke filled the room like black water. She was slumped against glass that had started to crack from heat, her red dress now gray with soot, her commanding presence reduced to human fragility. 3 other executives lay unconscious nearby. The manual override required knowledge no CEO possessed, but janitors who studied engineering at night knew exactly which panels to remove, which wires to cross. Nathan worked with practiced efficiency, thousands of hours of maintaining these systems paying off. The door locks disengaged with a reluctant click. He pulled Olivia out first. She was closest to the smoke, then returned for the others. The observation tower's windows exploded behind them, showering glass like deadly snow. Nathan shielded Olivia with his body, feeling shards tear through his shirt, drawing blood he'd worry about later. The journey down was nightmare navigation. Nathan carried Olivia when her designer heels failed, guided the conscious executives through shortcuts only service staff knew. He used his knowledge of ventilation systems to find pockets of clean air, his understanding of the building's structure to avoid areas near collapse. When a support beam crashed down, blocking their path, he remembered the auxiliary maintenance tunnel that connected to the parking garage, a route he'd used countless times to avoid executive areas during his shameful janitorial work. They emerged into parking lot chaos, fire trucks, ambulances, news vans already gathering. Nathan deposited Olivia near paramedics and began to fade back, but she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Through oxygen masks and smoke tears, her eyes held something new, recognition not of his face but of his worth. "You knew," she whispered, her voice raw. "You knew exactly how to save us." Nathan pulled free gently. "I'm just the janitor, Miss Sterling. I know the building." But she'd seen more, the way he'd analyzed the explosion pattern, the engineering terminology he'd used under stress, the precise calculations behind every decision. This wasn't just building knowledge. This was expertise that belonged in boardrooms, not boiler rooms. As paramedics led him away to treat his wounds, Olivia made a decision that would change everything. She would learn exactly who Nathan Carter really was. The investigation began that night. Olivia, despite doctor's orders, commandeered a conference room and her laptop, diving into personnel files with obsessive focus. Nathan Carter's official record was thin, hired 2 years ago, exemplary janitor, no incidents. But she dug deeper, pulling archived files from Nexus Dynamics, accessing databases that required CEO clearance. What she found made her hands tremble. The Aurora Project documents painted 2 pictures. The official report, signed by Damian Cross, blamed Nathan for catastrophic design failures. But the technical appendices told different stories. Nathan's original specifications had been altered, safety margins reduced, testing protocols shortened, quality materials replaced with cheaper alternatives. The signatures authorizing these changes belonged to Damian, but they'd been buried in subsidiary documentation. Nathan had tried to stop the test, his emails increasingly desperate, warning of disaster. His final message, sent 12 hours before the explosion: "People will die. This isn't about careers anymore. Please listen." No one had. She found more patent applications in Nathan's name, innovations that had mysteriously appeared in Sterling products 2 years later. The propulsion technology that made her company successful had roots in his graduate thesis. The efficiency algorithms her engineers claimed credit for matched his published papers from before the fall. They'd been mining his intellectual graveyard, building success on the reputation they'd helped destroy. The security footage from tonight's explosion was most damning. The blast originated from a section Damian had insisted on inspecting earlier, overriding safety protocols with executive authority. He'd been adjusting something near the fuel lines, claiming to check modifications he'd ordered. The cameras showed him leaving minutes before the explosion, his calm demeanor suggesting knowledge of what was coming. This wasn't negligence, this was attempted murder disguised as industrial accident, designed to eliminate Olivia and blame another failure on the company's struggles. Olivia's investigation led her to Nathan's apartment at dawn. The building's decay shocked her: water stains, painting abstract art on ceilings, stairs that groaned like mourners. The smell of poverty that no amount of cleaning could hide. She found his door and knocked, her designer heels absurd in the narrow hallway. Grace answered, still in pajamas covered with cartoon astronauts, her eyes widening at the elegant stranger. "Is your father home?" Olivia asked, suddenly aware she didn't know how to talk to children. Grace studied her with Nathan's intelligence. "He's at the hospital." They wanted to keep him overnight, but he said we couldn't afford it. Are you the lady from the fire? He said you were pretty, but sad. The honesty was disarming. Olivia noticed the apartment behind Grace, clean but worn, engineering books stacked like pillars, a birthday card on the table reading World's Best Dad in crayon. Nathan returned to find them at his kitchen table. Grace serving Olivia juice in their only unchipped glass, chattering about school while Olivia listened with genuine interest. He froze in the doorway, bandages visible beneath his torn shirt. Miss Sterling? She stood, suddenly uncertain. I know the truth, she said simply. About Aurora, about Damien, about everything. The silence stretched until Grace piped up. Daddy, is she going to help us? Damien's final play was masterful in its cruelty. He'd convened an emergency board meeting while Olivia was still recovering, presenting forged documents that painted Nathan as a saboteur who'd caused the testing facility explosion. His narrative was compelling: disgraced engineer seeking revenge, using his janitor access to plant devices, nearly killing the CEO he blamed for his downfall. He had receipts for materials Nathan supposedly purchased, edited security footage showing him in suspicious areas, even a manifesto created from Nathan's old emails, words rearranged to sound threatening. The boardroom transformed into a courthouse. Damien presented his evidence with prosecutor's precision while Nathan sat in a chair usually reserved for fired executives. Olivia entered late, still wearing yesterday's soot-stained dress, moving like she'd aged years in hours. The board members avoided her eyes, they'd already been convinced. Damien had promised stability, traditional leadership, an end to the chaos that followed her wherever she went. The evidence is overwhelming, Damien concluded, his gray suit immaculate as always. Nathan Carter is a dangerous man who infiltrated our company for revenge. His presence here threatens everyone's safety. I move for immediate termination and criminal prosecution. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Nathan hadn't spoken once, knowing his words carried no weight here. But Olivia stood, and the room stilled. I have evidence too, she said, connecting her laptop to the presentation system. The real Aurora files appeared on screen, the unedited emails, the original specifications, the financial records showing Damien's embezzlement. She walked them through years of deception with CEO authority, her voice gaining strength as she revealed each lie. The security footage from last night played, showing Damien's suspicious activity before the explosion. You orchestrated everything, she said, facing Damien directly. Nathan's disgrace, the recent failures, last night's explosion. You've been destroying this company to seize control, killing people for profit. Damien's composure cracked slightly. These are desperate fabrications from a CEO who's lost control, he countered. She's been compromised by this man's influence. The fact that she's defending a janitor shows her judgment has failed. Nathan finally stood, and his words carried the weight of 6 years of silence. I don't need Miss Sterling's defense, he said quietly. But this company needs the truth. The Aurora technology Mr. Cross stole and corrupted, I can fix it. The propulsion problems you're facing, I have solutions. Not because I'm trying to prove something, but because it's the right thing to do. My daughter deserves a father who stands up for truth, even when the world prefers lies. He pulled out his blueprints, not the simplified versions from before, but complete technical documents. Here's how to fix your satellites. Here's how to prevent more explosions. Here's how to make this company what it should have been. He placed them on the table. Use them or don't. Believe me or don't. But know that while you've been playing politics, people have been dying. I've stayed silent to protect my daughter. I'm speaking now to protect everyone else's. The room erupted in arguments. Board members examined the blueprints, some recognizing the brilliance immediately. Others questioned the evidence against Damien. The debate raged while Nathan stood calmly, Grace's photo visible in his wallet, giving him strength. Olivia watched him with something beyond professional interest. This was a man who'd lost everything and retained his integrity, who'd been crushed but not conquered. The final vote was narrow but decisive. The evidence against Damien was too substantial to ignore. Security escorted him out while he threatened lawsuits, promised revenge, his composed mask finally shattering to reveal the predator beneath. The board approved Nathan's proposals, offering him a consultant position to implement his solutions, but Nathan declined. I just wanted the truth known, he said. I have a job already. Federal investigators arrived within hours. Olivia's evidence triggering immediate action. Damien's arrest made headlines: corporate espionage, attempted murder, fraud spanning years. His assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed more thoroughly than Nathan's had ever been. The man who'd built a career on others' graves found himself in a cell, his diamond watch replaced with steel handcuffs. Sterling Aerospace's stock began recovering immediately. Nathan's solutions, implemented by humbled engineers, worked flawlessly. The next satellite launch succeeded perfectly, the propulsion system performing beyond expectations. The board formally apologized to Nathan, offering him any position he wanted. He asked only for his janitor's salary to be doubled, and for Grace's college fund to be established. His humility made them more ashamed than anger would have. Olivia found herself changed by the experience. The walls she'd built were crumbling, replaced by something unfamiliar: respect for someone who wanted nothing from her, who'd saved her without expecting reward. She started visiting Nathan's apartment, initially to discuss implementation of his designs, but increasingly just to exist in a space where she wasn't CEO, where Grace called her Miss Olivia, and insisted she stay for dinner, where success was measured in laughter rather than stock prices. The other board members struggled with their complicity. Some resigned, unable to face how easily they'd been manipulated. Others approached Nathan personally, apologizing with genuine remorse. He forgave them all, understanding how power systems worked. How good people could do terrible things when fear and ambition mixed. His grace made their shame deeper but also offered redemption. 3 months later, the ceremony was small but significant. Sterling Aerospace officially recognized Nathan Carter as the true inventor of their core technology. His name added to patents, his contributions acknowledged publicly. He stood at the podium in the same worn suit, Grace in the front row wearing her best dress, Olivia beside her. His speech was brief. Innovation doesn't care about your title or your circumstances. It only cares about your willingness to see problems and solve them. Every person in this company, from the boardroom to the boiler room, has that capacity. Respect it. The applause was thunderous, but Nathan had already left the stage, kneeling beside Grace, telling her he was proud of her for sitting still so long. Olivia watched them, and felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she'd thought ambition had burned away. Olivia arrived at Nathan's apartment on a Tuesday evening, holding a bottle of wine that cost more than his monthly rent and a pizza from the place Grace had mentioned loving. The contrast should have been absurd: her designer dress in his modest hallway, but somehow it felt natural. Grace opened the door before she knocked, having watched from the window. "Daddy's making spaghetti, but he always makes too much, so you have to help eat it," she announced, pulling Olivia inside with childhood insistence. The apartment had changed subtly. Nathan's promotion to senior consultant, which he'd finally accepted after Olivia threatened to hire Grace as negotiator, meant real furniture, windows that closed properly, and Grace's inhaler always full. But the essence remained. Engineering books still towered, crayon drawings still decorated the fridge, love still filled spaces money couldn't touch. Nathan emerged from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder, and his smile made Olivia's practiced composure irrelevant. Dinner was chaotic perfection. Grace dominated conversation, explaining her science project with Nathan's intensity and her mother's charm. She'd built a model rocket, painted it red like Olivia's dress, because red means powerful. Nathan helped serve, their movements synchronized from practice, including Olivia naturally. The wine remained unopened, juice boxes were apparently the preferred beverage. Olivia found herself laughing at Grace's jokes, real laughter that started in her stomach and erupted without calculation. "Miss Olivia," Grace said suddenly, serious as only 8-year-olds could be, "are you lonely?" Nathan started to redirect her, but Olivia answered honestly, "Sometimes, yes." Grace nodded sagely. "Daddy was lonely too, but he says I fixed that. Maybe you need fixing too." The simplicity was profound. Nathan's face reddened, but Olivia reached across the table, touching Grace's hand. "Maybe I do." After Grace went to bed, they sat on Nathan's second-hand couch, the city lights painting patterns through clean windows. "She's extraordinary," Olivia said. Nathan's pride was quiet but absolute. "She saved me," he admitted. "When everything fell apart, she was the reason to keep going." Olivia understood. "You saved me too," she said. "Not just from the fire, from becoming someone I wouldn't recognize." They talked until dawn about rockets and dreams, about failure and redemption, about the weight of other people's expectations, and the freedom of losing everything. Nathan showed her Sarah's picture, explaining how grief had taught him that love wasn't possession but presence. Olivia told him about her father, how success had become a prison she'd built herself, bar by bar, until she couldn't remember why she'd wanted to be inside. "I don't need saving," she said as sunrise painted the apartment gold. "I need someone who sees me as Olivia, not the CEO." Nathan's response was simple. "I see a woman who stayed for juice boxes and spaghetti, who laughs at an 8-year-old's jokes, who admits to loneliness. The CEO is just your day job. The truth of it made her cry small, surprising tears that he didn't try to stop, just handed her a tissue with the same calm he'd shown during the explosion. Grace found them asleep on the couch the next morning, Olivia's head on Nathan's shoulder, his arm protective around her. She covered them with her favorite blanket, the one with stars and planets, and made herself cereal quietly. When they woke, embarrassed and apologizing, she simply said, "About time, Daddy. Can Olivia stay for breakfast?" The question carried weight beyond pancakes. The photo appeared in business magazines 6 months later, Nathan Carter and Olivia Sterling at the launch of Sterling's new satellite, Grace between them holding a model rocket. The headline read, "From Janitor to Revolutionary, the man who saved Sterling Aerospace." But the real story was, in their eyes, Nathan looking at Grace with father's pride. Grace grinning at the camera with pure joy, and Olivia looking at both of them like she'd finally found home. Nathan still worked late sometimes, but now in a proper office, solving problems that mattered. Olivia still ran her company with brilliance, but tempered with humanity learned from a man who'd mopped her floors. Grace grew up knowing that dignity didn't come from titles, that love mattered more than money, that sometimes the world was wrong, and you had to prove it, one blueprint at a time. The janitor who didn't belong had become the heart of an empire, not through conquest but through quiet courage. The CEO who had everything discovered what she'd been missing in a modest apartment over spaghetti and juice boxes. And an 8-year-old girl proved that wisdom didn't require age, just the ability to see people for who they really were. The red dress and the faded shirt hung in the same closet now, side by side, telling a story about how humiliation became honor, how isolation became family, how a single dad who didn't belong showed the world that belonging wasn't about where you came from. It was about where you chose to stand when everything was on fire, and who you chose to save when saving yourself would have been easier. Grace's rocket model sat on Olivia's desk at Sterling Aerospace, painted red, reaching for stars that no longer seemed impossibly far. Sometimes employees would ask about it, and she'd tell them about a janitor who saved a company, a daughter who saved a father, and how the most valuable things in life were often disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, when no one was watching. The company motto changed that year. Instead of reaching beyond, it became Nathan's words from that terrible boardroom day. Belonging isn't determined by suits or circumstances, it's earned by what you create. Every employee from CEO to janitor received the same plaque with those words. Some said it was just corporate messaging, but those who'd been there, who'd witnessed the fall and rise of Nathan Carter, knew it was a promise, that every person mattered, that every voice deserved hearing. That revolution sometimes pushed a mop bucket before it launched rockets. And in a modest apartment that had become a home, 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives, built something stronger than any boardroom or bank account could contain, a family forged from humiliation and hope. Tested by fire and triumph, bound by the simplest and strongest force in any universe. Love that saw past titles to truth, past circumstances to souls, past what the world said you were to who you chose to become. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Leave your thoughts below, and let hope travel far.